On a freezing November night, a billionaire heard a newborn crying beneath a single park lamp. A 6-year-old girl stood guard, whispering two names that shattered his past. He offered warmth. She offered trust. By dawn, a broken life would change if he chose to stay and face the truth together. The November wind cut through the city like a blade that didn't need permission. Graham Kincaid stepped out of the glass tower where applause still echoed behind him. Another charity gala. Another polished smile. Another night where people praised his generosity while knowing nothing about the quiet emptiness waiting for him at home. He loosened his tie and chose the longer walk cutting through Lakeshore Park. The lamps were spaced too far apart, leaving islands of yellow light floating in darkness. His footsteps were the only sound until they weren't. A cry drifted through the air. Not loud, not desperate. Thin, fragile, almost swallowed by the wind. Graham stopped. The sound came again. He followed it slower now, every instinct on edge. Beneath one lonely lamp, he saw a park bench, and on it a small figure curled inward as if trying to disappear. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her coat was buttoned wrong, her shoes were mismatched, and in her arms, wrapped carefully against her chest, was a bundle of blankets. The cry came from there. Graham halted several steps away. He didn't move closer. He didn't speak. The girl noticed him instantly. She shifted her body, turning sideways, placing herself between him and the bundle like a wall far too small for the job. Her eyes were wide, alert, calculating, far older than her face. "Don't," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Graham raised his hands, slowly, palms open. "I won't," he replied. "I'm not coming closer." The baby whimpered again. The girl tightened her hold, rocking slightly, instinctive and careful. The cold pressed in. Under that single lamp, Graham realized something he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, someone wasn't asking him for anything. They were guarding everything. Cliffhanger beat. The girl's eyes never left his. "If you're leaving," she said quietly, "do it fast." Graham stayed exactly where he was. "I'm not here to scare you," he said gently. "You don't have to talk to me." The girl studied him the way adults studied contracts, looking for hidden costs. The baby stirred again, a soft, breathless sound. She adjusted the blankets with careful hands, shielding the tiny face from the wind. "You shouldn't be out here," Graham added, not as a command. "Just a fact." "I know," she replied. There was no self-pity in her voice, only awareness. He swallowed. "Are you waiting for someone?" She shook her head once. The silence stretched. Graham let it. He crouched slightly, not closer, just lower, so he wasn't towering over her. "My name is Graham," he said. "You don't have to tell me yours." Another pause. Finally she spoke. "I didn't say you could sit." He nodded and remained standing. The baby fussed louder now. The girl hummed under her breath, a soft, uneven melody, and the sound settled the child almost instantly. Graham felt something tighten in his chest. "You're good with him," he said. "He's not heavy," she answered. "I am." That landed harder than she knew. Graham took a slow breath. "I can help," he offered. "Warm place, food, a doctor, nothing else." Her eyes sharpened. "What do you want?" "Nothing." She didn't believe him. Not yet. She glanced toward the dark path behind him, then back at his face. "If you go," she said carefully, "don't come back." His brow furrowed. "Why? Because coming back is worse," she replied. The honesty of it stopped him cold. "I won't leave," Graham said after a beat. "Not without saying goodbye." She searched his face again. This time longer. "Okay," she said at last, "but you stay there." He did. The baby sighed, finally calm. Cliffhanger beat. She shifted the blankets and whispered, almost as an afterthought, "We're cold." Graham took off his coat. He didn't step forward. He simply held it out, letting it hang in the space between them. The girl hesitated, then reached out with one hand, never letting go of the baby, and pulled the coat around the bundle. "Thank you," she said, surprising him. The baby quieted completely. Graham exhaled. "What's his name?" Her shoulders tensed. "Why?" "So I don't call him, hey," he answered softly. She considered this. Then Jonah. The world tilted. Graham's knees weakened just enough that he had to brace himself against the bench. Jonah. The name echoed through him, dragging memories he kept locked away, scribbled lists, late-night laughter, a woman at a piano choosing names like they were promises. "And you?" he asked, though his voice wasn't steady anymore. "I'm Maisie." That did it. The cold vanished. The park disappeared. All Graham could see was another night, another life, a notebook on a coffee table with those exact two names written side by side. Maisie watched him carefully. "You know them," she said. "Yes," he admitted, tears blurring his vision. He didn't wipe them away. "I do." She frowned, not frightened, just thoughtful. "Are they bad names?" "No," he said quickly. "They're beautiful." The baby stirred. Maisie adjusted her hold, practiced protective. Graham swallowed hard. "You can't stay here tonight," he said. "Not in this cold." Her chin lifted. "We're not lost." "I know," he replied. "But you're not alone either." She looked down at Jonah, then back at Graham. "Will you come back?" she asked quietly, "if you leave to get food?" He didn't answer right away. "I will," he said at last. "And I won't take a step closer unless you say so." She studied him one final time. Then slowly she extended her free hand. "Okay," Maisie said, "but you hold mine, not him." Graham took her hand carefully, reverently. And just like that, his life shifted. They didn't walk fast. Graham matched his pace to Maisie's small steps, even when the wind pushed harder, even when the night seemed eager to close in around them. She kept her eyes forward, one hand gripping his, the other wrapped securely around Jonah. "You live far?" she asked. "Not far," Graham replied. "Up high." She glanced at him sideways. "High like clouds." He smiled faintly. "Not that high." They crossed the street in silence. Every car that passed made Maisie tighten her grip for half a second, then relax again. She never pulled Jonah closer, she was already holding him as close as possible. The building appeared like a tower of light against the dark. Glass, steel, quiet power. Maisie stopped at the entrance. "This is yours?" she asked. "Yes." Her brows knit together. "It's very big, it's very empty," he answered before thinking. She didn't comment on that. Inside the lobby was warm and silent. Graham nodded to the security desk and signed them in, properly stating clearly that he had found 2 minors who needed temporary shelter and medical care. The guard listened, nodded, logged everything without questions. Maisie noticed. Everything. The elevator doors closed with a soft hum. As they rose, Maisie shifted slightly, angling Jonah away from the mirrored walls. "Is it safe?" she asked. "Yes," Graham said. "And if at any moment you want to leave, you tell me." The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Maisie's breath caught not in awe but confusion. The space was beautiful, spotless, cold. Furniture arranged like it had never been used. No photographs, no toys, no signs of life. Graham turned on the lights, then the heat. He carefully laid folded blankets on the sofa and gestured. "May I?" he asked, pointing to Jonah. Maisie hesitated, then nodded. Graham placed the baby down slowly, arranging cushions, so Jonah was fully supported and visible at all times. He stepped back immediately. Maisie leaned over her brother, counting his breaths with quiet focus. "I need to go out," Graham said gently. "To buy formula. Diapers. Things he needs." Her head snapped up. "You'll come back," she said. Not a question. "Yes." She stared at him, searching. If you don't, she said softly, I'll understand. The words hit harder than any accusation. Graham crouched to her level. Not this time, he said. I promise. He left the door open as he stepped out, so she could hear him come back. The city had never felt so loud. Graham drove like every second mattered because it did. He grabbed formula bottles, diapers, wipes, infant thermometer, baby-safe blankets, groceries. He didn't hesitate. He didn't compare prices. He thought of Maisie's words. Coming back is worse. Not tonight. When he returned, the penthouse door was exactly where he'd left it open. Maisie was still on the sofa, still upright, still counting Jonah's breaths. She looked up the instant she heard his steps. You came back, she said. I told you I would. She nodded once. Relief passed across her face so quickly it was almost missed. Graham unpacked the bags, slowly explaining everything he did. This is formula. I'll make it how the instructions say. This checks temperature. She watched like a supervisor, serious and precise. Can I feed him? She asked. Yes, Graham said immediately. He prepared the bottle under her watchful eye, tested the temperature on his wrist, then handed it over. Maisie fed Jonah with calm skill, adjusting his position, pausing when he needed to breathe. The baby drank greedily, then sighed. Graham sat across from them, hands clasped. You've done this before, he said. Every night, she replied. Mom taught me. The word landed gently. Mom. Is she coming back? Graham asked carefully. Maisie didn't answer right away. She told me to be brave, she said instead. So I am. The apartment grew quieter as Jonah drifted to sleep. Graham picked up his phone. I'm calling a doctor, he said, a pediatrician, to make sure Jonah's okay. Her shoulders tensed. They won't take him, no, Graham said firmly. I'm doing this the right way. You'll stay with him. Always. After a few calls, he arranged a legal documented house visit. Maisie exhaled. Later, he set up the guest room, fresh sheets, warm light. He pulled out the widest dresser drawer, lined it carefully with clean blankets, and placed it securely on the bed. Maisie approached, eyes wide. It's like a nest, she whispered. That's exactly what I thought, Graham said. She placed Jonah gently inside, then climbed onto the bed, keeping one hand resting on the edge of the drawer. You can sleep, Graham told her. I'll stay. She watched him closely. Okay, she said finally. But don't turn the lights off all the way. I won't. Cliffhanger beat. In the quiet, Graham realized his empty home had already chosen its occupants. Dr. Sofia Rivera arrived just after midnight. She spoke softly, announced every movement, and never once rushed. Maisie watched her with the same intensity she'd given Graham, but something in the doctor's calm voice eased her grip. Jonah was examined carefully, heart, lungs, temperature, hydration. He's healthy, Dr. Rivera said. Strong. 2 weeks old, maybe a little more. Maisie relaxed for the first time. You did very well, the doctor told her. You kept him safe. Graham felt something twist in his chest. Dr. Rivera turned to him. You're doing the right thing. I'll file a report stating the child is healthy and under responsible care. Follow up in the morning. Maisie listened closely. I can stay with him? The doctor smiled. Right here. After she left, Graham prepared a simple meal. Maisie ate slowly, one hand always near Jonah. You can sleep, Graham said again. She hesitated. What if he cries, I'll wake you, he said, or I'll take care of him. She studied his face, then nodded. That night, Jonah stirred twice. Both times, Maisie woke instantly, but Graham was already there, warming the bottle, changing diapers with careful hands. You don't have to, Maisie whispered. I want to, he replied. Near dawn, Maisie finally slept deeply. Her hand remained stretched toward Jonah's drawer. Graham sat in the chair watching them both. He had spent years believing success meant control. But in the soft breathing of a 6-year-old girl and a newborn boy, he understood something else entirely. He was needed. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Morning entered the penthouse carefully, as if it didn't want to wake anyone too soon. A pale winter glow slipped through the tall windows, brushing across the sofa, the makeshift crib, the small hand still resting protectively on its edge. Jonah slept peacefully. Maisie slept lighter, her breathing shallow but steady, ready to wake at the smallest sound. Graham hadn't slept at all. He stood by the window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the city wake up far below. Traffic returned. Horns sounded. Life continued, unaware that his own had quietly shifted overnight. Jonah stirred. Before Graham could move, Maisie's eyes opened. "I've got him," she whispered, already sitting up. "You can rest," Graham said softly. "I'm here." She hesitated, then nodded. "Just wake me if he makes that sound." "What sound?" "The one before he cries." Graham almost smiled. They worked together without speaking, formula warmed, bottle tested, Jonah fed. The baby gazed upward, unfocused, then suddenly still, as if listening. Maisie hummed. It was the same melody from the night before, more confident now. Graham froze mid-step. He knew that tune. He hadn't heard it in 6 years yet. It lived somewhere deep in his memory, played on a piano in a small apartment, late evenings, laughter between notes. "Where did you learn that?" he asked carefully. Maisie shrugged. "Mom plays it when she's thinking." Something in Graham tightened. "Does your mom play often?" he asked. "All the time," Maisie said. "She teaches." Graham set the bottle down slowly. "Teaches what?" Maisie looked up at him. "Piano." The room felt suddenly smaller. "I have one," Graham said without thinking. Her eyes widened, not with excitement but curiosity. "A piano," he nodded. "Would you like to see it?" She followed him into the living room, stopping short when she saw the grand piano in the corner. It was polished, untouched, more decoration than instrument. She approached it like something sacred. "May I?" she asked. "Yes," Graham said. "Of course." Maisie climbed onto the bench, adjusted her posture with practiced care, and placed her fingers on the keys. Then she played. The melody was simple, clear, true, and unmistakable. Graham's breath caught, because only one person had ever played it that way. Cliffhanger beat. Maisie turned to him and said, "Mom says music remembers people." The last note faded. Maisie's fingers hovered above the keys, waiting as if listening for something only she could hear. Then she turned and looked at Graham, really looked at him. "You're sad," she said matter-of-factly. He didn't deny it. "That song does that to me." "Mom says that's okay," Maisie replied. "Sad doesn't mean broken." Graham swallowed. He moved to sit beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Your mom sounds wise." She smiled faintly. "She is." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been circling his thoughts since dawn. "What's your mom's name?" Maisie's hands dropped into her lap. "Ilara," she said. The sound of the name landed like glass breaking in slow motion. Graham stood abruptly, turning away before his face could betray him. Ilara. Not a coincidence. Not possible. Yet every piece kept sliding into place with terrifying precision. He pressed a hand to the piano lid, steadying himself. Maisie noticed everything. "You know her," she said quietly. "Yes," Graham admitted after a long pause. "I knew someone named Ilara." Her gaze sharpened. "Did she play like that?" "Yes." "Did she laugh when she messed up?" Maisie asked. Graham closed his eyes. "Yes." Silence stretched between them, not heavy but charged. "She's at the hospital," Maisie said suddenly. Graham turned back. "Right now," she nodded. "She got sick after Jonah was born. She told me to wait." "I waited." "How long?" Graham asked. Maisie thought for a moment. "A lot of nights." Graham knelt in front of her. "Maisie, I need to make some calls." Her shoulders tensed. To take us back? No, he said firmly. To help, he called hospitals, spoke carefully, asked the right questions, provided only what was appropriate. Most calls led nowhere until one paused a little longer than the others. Yes, the voice on the other end said. We do have a patient named Alara in intensive care. Graham's heart pounded. He hung up slowly. Maisie watched him, eyes wide but steady. Is it her, I think, so he said. Can we see her? She asked. He nodded. Yes, but we'll do it properly. Together. Maisie hugged Jonah closer. Okay, she said. She'll like you. Graham wasn't sure if he deserved that cliffhanger beat. As they prepared to leave, Maisie asked softly, Will she recognize me? Hospitals had a different kind of silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was controlled. Graham checked in, answered questions, followed procedure. A social worker spoke with him, briefly, listened carefully, noted everything. Maisie stood beside him, holding Jonah calm but alert. They were led upstairs. The doors to the ICU opened with a quiet hiss. Alara lay in the bed, pale against white sheets, machines breathing softly around her. Tubes, monitors, a rhythm of beeps that filled the room with life. Maisie stopped. For the first time since Graham had met her, she hesitated. It's okay, he said gently. We're right here. She stepped forward slowly, careful not to rush. She placed her hand on the bed rail, then reached for Alara's fingers. Mom, she whispered. It's me. No response. Maisie swallowed. I brought Jonah. Graham stepped closer, holding the baby so Alara could feel his warmth near her arm. We're okay, Maisie continued. Graham's taking care of us. Graham felt his throat tighten. He spoke quietly. Alara, it's me. The monitors remained steady, then barely noticeable a twitch of Alara's fingers. Maisie gasped softly, eyes shining. She heard us. A nurse entered gently. You have 15 minutes. They stayed close. Maisie talked about pancakes, about the piano, about Jonah's sleepy noises. Graham said nothing more, his presence was enough. When time was up, Maisie leaned down and kissed Alara's hand. We'll come back, she promised. Outside the room, Maisie finally let out a breath she'd been holding for years. She's strong, she said. I know it. Graham nodded. So did he. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. Mornings began early. Graham prepared Jonah's bottle while Maisie sat at the kitchen island humming softly, watching every movement like a conductor guiding an orchestra. She never hovered, but she never looked away either. After breakfast, they visited the hospital. Every day. Maisie spoke to Alara as if nothing had changed, describing small details with care. Graham burns the pancakes sometimes. Jonah makes a funny sound when he sleeps. I practiced the piano. Graham stood a step back, hands in his pockets, listening. He didn't interrupt. He didn't promise miracles. He simply showed up. In the afternoons, they returned to the penthouse. Graham worked remotely from the dining table, papers, spread out phone calls taken quietly. Maisie colored nearby, always positioning Jonah where she could see him. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt careful. That evening, Graham knelt in front of Maisie. I'm going to hire someone to help in the afternoons, he said. A professional, someone kind. It doesn't change anything, you're still with me. Jonah, too. Maisie frowned, thinking. Will she know how to hold him? Yes. Will she leave? Maisie asked. No, Graham said gently. And if she ever does, I'll tell you first. After interviews and background checks, Marin Briggs arrived, soft-spoken, experienced patient. She introduced herself to Maisie, first crouching to her level. You're the boss, Marin said kindly. Maisie blinked, then nodded. Okay. That night, Graham tucked Maisie into a proper bed for the first time. Jonah slept in a real crib nearby. Maisie stared at the ceiling, eyes wide. Is this allowed? She asked. Yes, Graham replied. You're safe. She turned onto her side, facing Jonah. Then I'll sleep. Graham lingered at the door longer than necessary. In the quiet, he realized something unsettling and beautiful. This wasn't temporary anymore. Cliffhanger beat. At the hospital, a nurse whispered to Graham there was a response today. More than yesterday. It happened just after midnight. Jonah stirred, then fussed, then cried not loudly but insistently. Graham was already awake, lifting him gently, checking his temperature the way Dr. Rivera had taught him. Slightly high. Not panic-worthy, but not nothing. Marin called the pediatric hotline while Graham followed instructions precisely: cool cloth fluids, steady monitoring. The apartment remained calm, lights, low voices, soft. Maisie stood nearby, clutching Jonah's blanket. "He'll be okay," Graham said, meeting her eyes. She nodded but didn't relax. "Dad," she said suddenly. The word slipped out by accident. They both froze. Graham swallowed. "I'm here." Maisie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Please don't let him disappear, too." Graham knelt in front of her. "No one disappears tonight," he said firmly. "Not on my watch." Jonah's breathing steadied. The fever eased slightly. Maisie finally sat down, exhaustion catching up to her bravery. Graham wrapped an arm around her shoulders, careful, asking permission with his eyes. She leaned in. They stayed like that until dawn. At the hospital later that morning, Dr. Alvarez greeted them with a rare smile. She responded to voices again last night, he said. Heart rate, muscle movement, small but meaningful. Maisie squeezed Graham's hand. "She heard us," she said. "Yes," Graham replied. She did. That evening, Graham stayed at the hospital after Marin took Maisie and Jonah home. He sat by Alara's bedside, speaking softly. "I don't know how to fix the past," he said, "but I can protect what's here now." The machines hummed steadily. Then, barely perceptible, Alara's eyelids fluttered. Graham leaned forward, breath held. Nothing more happened, but it was enough. Cliffhanger beat. The nurse smiled gently. This is how it starts. It was an ordinary morning. That's what made it extraordinary. Graham was mid-sentence on a work call when his phone vibrated. Hospital number. He stood instantly, heart pounding. "She's awake," the nurse said, disoriented but conscious. Graham didn't remember ending the call. He drove back to the penthouse, hands shaking as he knelt in front of Maisie. "Your mom woke up," he said simply. Maisie stared at him, silent. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." At the hospital, Alara looked smaller than Graham remembered, but unmistakably herself. Her eyes found him immediately. "Graham," she whispered. "Yes," he said, voice breaking. "I'm here." Her first words after that weren't about him. "The kids, they're safe," he assured her. "They're with me." Tears slid down Alara's temples. When Maisie entered the room, all hesitation vanished. She rushed forward, careful but desperate, wrapping her arms around her mother. "I waited," she sobbed. "I did everything right." Alara held her as tightly as she could. "You were perfect," she whispered. Jonah slept peacefully in Alara's arms, unaware that everything had changed. Later, when Maisie stepped out with a nurse, Alara looked at Graham. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "About everything." He nodded. "When you're ready." As they left the room, Maisie took Graham's hand. "She's coming back," she said. "Yes," he agreed. And for the first time, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt real. Alara recovered slowly, the way real healing always happens, without drama, without shortcuts. The machines were quieter now. The room felt less like a border between worlds and more like a place people stayed to get better. Sunlight touched the curtains in the afternoons, and Maisie insisted on opening them just enough so her mother could see the sky. Graham visited every day, sometimes with Maisie and Jonah, sometimes alone late at night when the hospital hallways echoed with footsteps and unanswered questions. It was one of those nights when Alara finally spoke. "You found them in the park," she said softly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Yes," Graham replied. One bench, one lamp. Ilara closed her eyes. I should never have let it get that far. You didn't, Graham said quickly. They were safe. They were together. She nodded, then turned her head to look at him. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything tonight, he answered. I do, she insisted. Because silence is what broke everything before. She took a slow breath. My father died 6 years ago, Ilara began. But that's not the beginning. The beginning was long before that. My family wasn't safe. I left young, changed my name, built a life that didn't look back. Graham listened without interrupting. No anger, no judgment. When my sister called, Ilara continued, I panicked. I thought I could fix everything alone. I told myself I'd come back. I didn't know how to explain the truth, so I stayed silent. And when you found out you were pregnant, Graham said gently. Ilara nodded. I was terrified. I didn't want to trap you with my past. I didn't want you to see me differently. I already loved you, Graham replied quietly. Tears slid down her cheek. I know that now. They sat in silence, the kind that no longer hurt. And Jonah Graham asked after a while. Ilara's voice softened. After years alone, I tried again. I thought I could build something stable. But when I told him about the baby he left, I didn't chase him. Graham absorbed this. Then he said Jonah is Maisie's brother. Yes, that's enough for me. Ilara looked at him startled. I won't replace anyone, Graham continued. But I won't step away either. Her breath caught. You don't have to, I want to, he said simply. The door opened quietly. Maisie peeked in, holding Jonah's blanket. Can I come back? She asked. Ilara smiled. Always. Maisie climbed onto the bed, curling carefully beside her mother. Jonah slept nearby, safe. Graham stood back watching. There were no villains in this story. Only people who survived the best way they knew how. Cliffhanger beat. As Maisie drifted to sleep, she murmured, Graham, you stay right. Maisie sensed it before anyone told her. Children often do. Graham noticed the way she studied him now. Longer glances, thoughtful, pauses, quiet comparisons she never voiced. She watched how he held Jonah, how he always positioned himself between them and the world, without making it obvious. One afternoon, while Ilara rested, Maisie sat beside Graham in the hospital lounge coloring. Can I ask you something? She said without looking up. Anything, Graham replied. Why do you never let go of Jonah? She asked. He hesitated. Because he's small. She nodded slowly. And because you're scared. He met her gaze. Yes, he admitted. She thought about that. Then, you don't look scared when you look at me. That's because you're brave, Graham said. Maisie tilted her head. Mom says bravery isn't loud. She's right. That night, Ilara called Graham closer. She's ready, Ilara whispered. And so are you. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. Maisie sat on the bed between the two adults, swinging her feet gently. Ilara and I need to tell you something important, Graham began. Maisie straightened. Okay. Ilara took her daughter's hand. Do you remember when you asked if Graham knew me before Maisie nodded? We weren't just friends, Ilara said. We loved each other. Maisie's eyes flicked to Graham, and Ilara continued softly. Graham is your father. The room went silent. Maisie didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She stared at Graham, searching his face for something, recognition maybe, or confirmation. Then she said quietly, Is that why you stayed? Graham knelt in front of her. Yes. She stepped off the bed and wrapped her arms around his neck with surprising strength. I knew you were special, she said firmly. Graham broke. He hugged her carefully, reverently, like something sacred had finally found its place. Can I call you Dad? Maisie asked, almost shy now. I would love that, he replied, voice shaking. Ilara watched them, tears streaming freely. Later, as Maisie played softly on the hospital piano, Ilara spoke to Graham again. "She's happy," she said. "Yes," Graham replied. "But we go slow." "One step at a time," Ilara agreed. Outside the window, the city moved on unaware. Inside, a family quietly found its shape. Cliffhanger beat, Maisie looked up from the piano and said, "Does this mean we don't say goodbye anymore?" The weeks that followed were filled with careful decisions. Doctors spoke of timelines. Therapists spoke of strength and patience. Social workers ensured every step was done correctly. Graham welcomed all of it. Transparency mattered now. Ilara improved daily. Maisie returned to school part-time, walking in, holding Graham's hand, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. Jonah grew stronger, louder, more curious. Home changed again. They moved into a single-story house near the park, the same park, though the bench was never mentioned. Ilara needed space to recover. Maisie needed a yard. Jonah needed sunlight. The house filled with music. Ilara taught piano again. Maisie practiced daily fingers, confident posture, perfect. Graham listened from the doorway, realizing that joy didn't have to be loud to be complete. One evening, Maisie brought Graham a drawing. 4 figures now. "Is this okay?" she asked. "It's perfect," he replied. Later, when the children slept, Ilara and Graham sat on the porch. "We can't erase the past," Ilara said, "but we can stop running from it." "I don't want perfection," Graham replied. "I want honesty." She smiled. "That I can do." Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Graham knelt in the grass where Maisie rode her bike in circles and Jonah napped under a tree. "This isn't a grand moment," he told Ilara, "but it's real." "That's better," she said. When he proposed, Maisie clapped first. "Yes," Ilara whispered. That night, Graham tucked Maisie into bed. "You staying?" she asked sleepily. "Always," he said. She smiled. "Good. Because some stories don't need saving, they just need staying." Recovery changed the rhythm of their days. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in small, steady ways that only became noticeable when Graham stopped to look back. Ilara no longer needed the walker. Her steps were slow but confident, especially when she crossed the living room to sit at the piano each morning. Maisie would wait until the bench was free before climbing up beside her, careful not to interrupt the ritual. Jonah, now more alert, lay on a blanket nearby his eyes, following the movement of fingers over keys. Music filled the house like breath. Graham worked from home more often than not. His meetings happened in the study, but his breaks were spent in the doorway, watching, listening, learning how to exist in a space where he was needed without being needed all at once. One afternoon, while Maisie practiced scales, Ilara spoke quietly. "She hasn't asked about the park," she said. Graham nodded. "She doesn't need to." Maisie had begun to sleep through the night. No more sudden jolts awake. No more checking the hallway before closing her eyes. When she did wake early, she padded into the kitchen, barefoot, sat at the counter, and waited for Graham to notice her. He always did. "Morning, kiddo," he'd say. She smiled. "Morning, Dad?" The word no longer startled either of them. That evening, the 3 of them, 4 counting Jonah, sat at the dinner table. Nothing special. Pasta, warm bread, laughter over spilled water. Maisie suddenly looked up. "Can I ask something?" Yes, Ilara and Graham answered at the same time. She considered her words carefully. "Does this mean we don't have to leave anymore?" The question landed softly, but it carried everything. Graham set his fork down. "We're not going anywhere," he said. Ilara reached for Maisie's hand. "This is home." Maisie nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then she turned to Jonah and said, "See, we're staying." Jonah kicked happily, unaware of the promise being made. Later that night, Graham found Ilara on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars fight through city light. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. For the first time in a long time, she looked at him. I'm scared, though. Me too, Graham admitted. But not of leaving, she said. Of losing this. Graham took her hand. Then we protect it. Together. Inside, Maisie slept deeply, her door open. Jonah breathed softly in his crib. For the first time, nothing in the house felt temporary. And that changed everything. Cliffhanger beat. The next morning, a letter arrived, official, careful, asking Graham to formalize guardianship steps. The letter sat unopened on the kitchen counter for a full hour. Not because Graham was afraid, but because opening it meant acknowledging that love now came with responsibility that couldn't be improvised. Ilara read it first. It's standard, she said calmly. They want to make sure everything is secure. For the kids, I know, Graham replied. I just want to do it right. They did. Appointments were scheduled. Paperwork filled out. Conversations had with patience and transparency. Maisie was included where appropriate, never overwhelmed, always informed. Does this change anything? She asked. No, Graham answered honestly. It makes it stronger. That afternoon, Maisie brought home a school assignment. Draw your family. She handed the paper to Graham, watching his face closely. 4 figures stood beneath a yellow sun. The smallest one had a speech bubble that read, "We're okay." Graham swallowed. I'm going to frame this, Maisie smiled, relieved. That night, Jonah cried longer than usual, teething, the pediatrician said. Normal, temporary. Maisie hovered in the doorway, worried. Graham lifted Jonah, gently pacing the room, humming the same melody Maisie once hummed on a park bench. Where did you learn that? She asked. From you, he replied. She sat on the bed watching, then said quietly, I used to think being brave meant not crying. Graham met her eyes. Being brave means not being alone. She considered that, then nodded. Later, when the house was quiet, Ilara joined Graham in the nursery. You didn't hesitate, she said. About Jonah. He's part of us, Graham replied simply. Ilara's eyes shone. You don't owe us this. I know, Graham said. That's why it matters. Weeks passed. Ilara returned to teaching, first 1 student, then 2. Maisie practiced harder than ever, her confidence growing with every piece. Jonah laughed more often now, a full open sound that filled the rooms. One evening, Maisie climbed onto Graham's lap with a book. Read, she asked. Of course. Halfway through, she interrupted. Dad, yes. If Mom ever gets sad again, you won't leave, right? Graham closed the book. No, he said firmly. We talk. We stay. She leaned against him. Okay. Sometimes healing didn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looked like consistency. Cliffhanger beat. On a quiet Sunday, Graham took Ilara back to the park for the first time. The park looked smaller in daylight. Children ran past the benches, dogs tugged at leashes. The lake shimmered under a pale sky. Nothing marked the place as special, except for the way Maisie slowed when they approached the lamppost. She stopped. This is where we were, she said calmly. Ilara's breath caught. Graham stayed silent. Maisie didn't sit. She didn't need to. I don't feel cold here anymore, she added after a moment. Ilara knelt, wrapping her arms around her daughter. You don't have to, she whispered. Jonah babbled from his stroller, fascinated by the leaves overhead. They walked on. Later that afternoon, back at the house, Graham made a decision he'd been circling for weeks. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't rushed. He asked Ilara to marry him on the back lawn, Maisie riding her bike nearby, Jonah asleep in the shade. This isn't about fixing the past, he said. It's about choosing the future. Ilara didn't answer right away. She looked at Maisie, laughing freely now, at Jonah, safe and loved, then back at Graham. Yes, she said softly, 1 step at a time. That night, Maisie insisted on sleeping with the door closed, a new milestone. Before bed, she hugged Graham tightly. You stayed, she said simply. Yes, he replied. I stayed. As the house settled into sleep, Graham stood at the window watching the city lights. He thought of the man he had been, the one who believed success was distance, that control was safety. He was wrong. Safety was a hand held without force. Healing was staying when leaving was easier. Family was choosing every day not to disappear. The wedding was small, not because they wanted less, but because they wanted only what mattered. It took place in early spring when the city finally softened. The backyard was filled with quiet, light white chairs and the low murmur of people who knew the whole story and never rushed it. Maisie wore a simple dress she'd chosen herself. No frills, no fuss. She held the rings in a small velvet box, gripping it like a mission. Jonah sat on Alara's mother's lap, wide-eyed, chewing thoughtfully on the edge of his sleeve. Graham stood at the front, hands steady, heart not. When Alara walked toward him, he didn't see the guests. He didn't hear the music. He saw only the woman who had survived, returned, and chosen to stay. The vows were short. "I promise honesty," Alara said, "even when it's hard." "I promise presence," Graham replied, "especially when it's hard." Maisie watched them closely. When the officiant asked for the rings, she stepped forward, opened the box, and paused. "Wait," she said. Everyone froze, not alarmed, just curious. Maisie looked up at Graham. "After this, you don't go anywhere, right?" Graham knelt in front of her without hesitation. "No, never." She nodded, once satisfied, and handed over the rings. The ceremony ended without applause, only smiles and quiet tears. Later, while adults talked in small clusters, Maisie sat beside Graham on the steps. "People keep saying, 'family,'" she said. "What does that mean now?" Graham thought carefully. "It means we keep choosing each other." She leaned into him. "Okay." That evening, after the guests left and the lights dimmed, Graham found Maisie asleep on the couch. Jonah curled beside her, one tiny hand wrapped around her finger. Alara stood nearby, watching. "She doesn't ask anymore," Alara whispered. "About leaving, she doesn't need to." Graham replied. Because the word family had stopped being an idea. It had become a place. Cliffhanger beat that night. Maisie called him something new without thinking. Dad. Graham looked up from the sink. "Yeah." Maisie stood in the doorway holding a library book. "Can you help me with this word?" It wasn't dramatic, and that's why it mattered. Days passed, then weeks. The house settled into a rhythm that didn't announce itself. Mornings meant toast and piano scales. Afternoons meant homework and naps. Evenings meant stories read twice because Maisie liked the second version better. Jonah learned to crawl, then to stand, then to laugh at the wrong moments. Maisie started second grade and insisted on packing her own lunch. Alara filled the music room with students again, her laughter drifting down the hall. Graham learned to be late for meetings without apology. One afternoon, Maisie came home quieter than usual. She dropped her backpack by the door and sat at the table. "What happened?" Graham asked gently. "Someone asked where my dad was," before she said. "And what did you say?" I said. "I found him." Graham felt his throat tighten. "Was that okay?" Maisie nodded. "Yeah, because it's true." That night, Graham tucked her in. "You don't have to explain us to anyone," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to." Sometimes healing didn't announce itself. Sometimes it looked like confidence. As summer arrived, they returned to the park, not to remember, but to play. Maisie ran freely now, never scanning the shadows. Jonah clapped at pigeons. Alara sat on the grass, watching them both. Graham sat beside her. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "Yes," Alara said, "but not the way I used to." "How so?" "I don't see what I lost," she replied. "I see what waited." They watched Maisie teach Jonah how to stack leaves into a crooked tower. "Dad," Maisie called. "He keeps knocking it down. That's his job." Graham laughed. That evening, as they walked home, Maisie slipped her hand into his. Not because she was afraid, because she wanted to. Cliffhanger beat. At bedtime, Maisie asked, "Will you tell me the story again?" Graham told the story slowly. Not the whole story. Not the parts that hurt. Just the truth that mattered. There was a man, he began, who thought being strong meant being alone. Maisie listened, curled under the blanket, Jonah asleep nearby. He had everything people told him to want, Graham continued. But he didn't know how to stay. What changed? Maisie asked. Graham smiled. He met a girl who knew how to protect what she loved. Maisie smiled back. She taught him, he said, that the bravest thing you can do is not disappear. When the story ended, Maisie was already drifting off. "Dad," she murmured. "Yes, thank you for finding us." Graham kissed her forehead. "Thank you for letting me stay." Later that night, Graham and Alara sat on the porch, the city quiet around them. "We didn't fix everything," Alara said softly. No, Graham agreed. "But we fixed enough." Inside the house breathed full, warm, lived in. Graham thought back to the man he had been. The one who believed wealth could solve emptiness. The one who walked past people every day without seeing them. He understood now. Love wasn't loud. Healing wasn't instant. Family wasn't perfect. Family was staying. In the end, it hadn't been the money, the house, or the future he'd planned. It had been a 6-year-old girl on a park bench holding everything she had left and daring him not to walk away. And he hadn't. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.